welcome to JFDI again. I hope you've been well. I hope you've had a good couple of weeks. It's been really good to just get away from a computer for a couple of weeks, to be fair. I've been out in the countryside. I've been able to take a few days sitting in the sun. And I pulled out my sketchbooks again, which is something that I've not done for a year or so. I'm really guilty of swapping between hobbies in the past. I'll do like 3-4 months of something quite intensely, and then I'll, in all honesty, I'll get bored of it, and then I'll switch to something else. It's a bit of a bad habit in some ways. It means that I get to a certain point, and then I drop it, and I'll pick up something else. And by dropping whatever I'm doing at that stage, whether it be the music or drawing or other things, I perhaps miss out on the chance to overcome a plateau or an obstacle, or to work through a challenging time and take an easy route by choosing something else. So it's got its pros and cons. I mean, I do feel a little bit more refreshed, as I say, having had a break from doing some music, but I am keen to get back to it. It seems a little bit to me like the end of a cycle, in a sense, because I'd done quite a few individual pieces, individual tracks that were videos in their own right. And then I pulled together that set that was a half-hour long techno set. And by doing that sort of one-off performance of a half hour, I almost feel like I drew a line underneath where I was at that point. I don't think that should be where I finish, though. I will continue doing techno music in a regular format, and I'll see where that takes me. But for the moment, I'm quite enjoying what I was doing while I was on holiday, and you can see some of that here. I'll start from a different angle, though. So I've always kept a sketchbook for years now. I always have like a very cheap book that I get from these came from Asda, in fact. They're pretty ropey paper, to be fair. It's very thin stuff, and I picked that as a strategy, really. The whole idea of having really nice paper and pens and inks and paintbrushes and stuff like that has always appealed to me. I've always been into stationery and whatever, and art materials, but I have this block, or have had this block, where as soon as I get a nice fresh perhaps artist grade piece of paper in front of me, everything falls apart. I lose confidence. I worry about how I'm going to damage the page, whether the idea that I've got is good enough, whether the materials are going to just get wasted, and I never really got the best out of it. So when I was determined to start doing sketchbooking properly, the great advice of I think his name's Jake, who runs a channel. I will put the link in the comments, in the description below, because it temporarily escapes me. But he does Inktober, and I'll come back to that another time. That's a fantastic project. Anyway, his advice, if you want to do sketchbooking and you come across that sort of stumbling block that I was describing, is just pick the cheapest notebook you can find. Really, just something that is easy to carry around. It doesn't matter if you damage a page, or if you tear one out, or if you scribble a shopping list on one page. Just move on to the next page, and you don't feel like you're then wasting anything. And that unlocked a really silly little, well, I think it was silly of myself to be blocked by that, but it unlocked that little blocker in my mind and allowed me to just kind of doodle, sketch, draw, and it made it easier to keep that habit going. Having said that, I do suffer from a little stumbling block where I kind of get bored after 3-4 months or so, and I put the sketchbook down again. So anyway, I will go through this sketchbook properly on another occasion, but you can see these are some entries for that Inktober project that I was telling you about. So I'll come back to that another time. This is where I started off 2 weeks ago. And I'm going to loop this round in with a little bit of topic as to why I brought this up today, apart from the fact that this is what I've been doing for the last couple of weeks. But this is the first sketch that I did while I was away on holiday, and it's the black paintwork was done with a brush pen, a Pentel brush pen. and I'll show you what that looks like here. It's a very cool little, it looks like a standard fountain pen or a fine liner pen from the outside, but when you pull it open, it's got a very nice brush point that leaves great marks that you can literally paint with. So that's the line work here, and then I use watercolor to go in over the top and to add some colors. And as I say, this is the first time I picked up watercolors in like 9 months to a year, and I was reasonably pleased with the result. But what I first sort of hit upon when I reviewed what I'd done here was that the color palette was all over the show, and that got me thinking. So I did a little YouTube search, as most of us do, and came across some really good tutorials on color palettes and understanding how to get the best out of a set of watercolors, what kind of colors to choose in any given circumstances. And I reviewed, let me find where it was, I reviewed the watercolor set that I've got. It's probably back here. Yeah, I reviewed the watercolor set that I've got, and as was advised in the YouTube tutorial, did some color wheels, and a massive learning straight away that I had no idea of, because my understanding of color has always been minimal. I just pick whatever colors look nice and try to use them in the most creative way as I could. Anyway, I discovered that the watercolor set that I have, which is a really basic Winsor & Newton one, I'll show you that here, actually has very cleverly designed, or sensibly designed. It's got cool colors, red, yellow, and blue, and it's got warm colors, red, yellow, blue, and it's got what are called secondary or tertiary colors as well. So these are your primaries, and these are your secondary or tertiary colors that are included in the set. But once you understand warm and cool colors, you've got the potential to limit your palette to either one or the other, or to carefully select a bit of both in a very controlled way rather than just a haphazard way, as I did on that first picture that I did, which is, I've lost myself in here. Yeah, the first picture I did was here. So following that, I started to look more carefully at the color selections I was using and had to go with that. So I limited my palette. I also realized when I was doing this one that I was using a little bit too little in the way of pigment. Everything was quite washed out. What I'm trying to get at in a very roundabout way, as I usually do, I found one piece of information, and taking that one nugget of learning, instead of going off and learning a bit more, I took that one bit of learning and then tried to apply it in a few different settings, a few different case studies, if you like. So I did this picture here, which was a bit scribbly, but I was quite pleased with. And then I'm going to try and focus this a little bit more. This one, again, a little bit too wishy-washy, but I felt like the colors started to sing a little bit more. So this one was done with primarily a warm palette. And then I kind of hit the point where, yes, this was all a little bit wishy-washy. Why is that? That's because I'm using a lot of water. What's that doing to the page? Well, because I've got a cheap notebook, that's limiting me now. And the art materials that I've got, they serve the purpose. But if I'm going to do watercolor and try and learn how to use that properly, that's where my materials in this instance were limiting me. So I was lucky enough to be able to nip out to art supplies, where I was staying, and I got myself a cheap but quite nice watercolor notebook. And then things started to work out a little bit better for me. Now, my sketch here was a little bit ropey, but it came out okay, and my colors started to work together a little bit more. I've got some cooler greens, I've got some warmer greens here, and I worked on the colors of the sunflowers. And then when I pushed a little bit harder I pushed myself a little bit harder to do a better sketch and to work more into the picture, I was really pleased with this result. Now, again, it's not perfect. I kind of fouled up the sky. I put too much pigment on there, but I kind of used that one bit of learning that I'd got, the color palette, and sort of keeping that more limited and working through and progressing into a picture with different graduations. And I really feel like that kind of worked out. And another one here, again, limited palette, quite warm in this instance. And this one, okay with the line drawing, quite pleased with that, but I fouled up the tree, didn't work enough into thinking that through before I jumped in with the paints. But yeah, as I say, this one bit of learning, rather than just taking that and then putting it on one side and saying, right, I'm on a roll now, what else can I learn? What else can I learn? Just take that one bit of learning that you've got, jump in with both feet and try and use it. I suppose this comes back to the title of the podcast, doesn't it? JFDI, just do it. Very ropey picture of a bike. And then this was one that I did today, now that I'm back home. This is from the back garden, a little bit of a painting of some flowers. So take a bit of a back step once you've figured something out and consider, is it worth dragging out the learning process more, or is it worth saying, I'm going to keep that piece of information and try and apply it? Maybe you'll find that you get to produce more that way. Just an idea. So yeah, just to round off today, thanks very much for coming back and watching after my little sabbatical. I'll be back with more. Hopefully have some music for you soon, and I'll see you on the next one. Take care.